You want to know what real intelligence looks like? It's not loud. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't need to prove itself in every room. True intelligence is quiet. It's selective. It's deliberate. It's the kind of presence that walks in without needing to announce itself and yet changes the atmosphere. The truly intelligent don't speak just to be heard. They speak when it matters. And they stay silent when peace is more powerful than proof. They don't react to every insult. They don't jump into every argument. They don't give their energy to every noise around them. They've learned something most people never do. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every battle deserves your spirit. And not every thought deserves a seat at the table of your mind. Stoicism doesn't ask you to know everything. It asks you to know what to ignore. Because clarity isn't about adding more, it's about subtracting what doesn't belong. So if you've ever felt drained by noise, overwhelmed by drama, or pulled into emotional battles that never end, you're not weak. You're just awakening. This video is for you. Here are 10 things truly intelligent people avoid. Not to impress others, but to protect their inner world. Let's begin. 1. Derb. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. There's a kind of power that doesn't raise its voice, a kind of strength that doesn't need to clap back, explain, or prove. And intelligent people, especially those who live by Stoic principles, they understand something most don't. Not every battle deserves a warrior, because most arguments you see today, they're not about finding truth. They're about feeding the ego. It's two people trying to outshout each other, trying to win a war neither of them truly understands, just to feel a few inches taller. But what if you saw arguments differently? What if, instead of thinking, I have to defend myself, you asked, will this exchange leave me more grounded or more drained? Will this make me more peaceful or just more reactive? Am I stepping into this to serve my values or just my pride? That internal dialogue. It's what separates the wise from the reactive. I remember someone at a former job. Let's call him Tyler. Tyler thrived on conflict. Every meeting turned into a debate. Even casual ideas became sparring matches. At first, I took the bait. I responded, defended myself, explained, countered, and for a while, I thought I was standing my ground. But I wasn't. I was being pulled into his storm. And the worst part, even when I won, I felt exhausted. It wasn't about being right. It was about being baited. Then I tried something different. I started watching instead of reacting. I let him say his piece. And I didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't explain. And you know what? The dynamic changed. Because when you refuse to play the ego's game, the game falls apart. That's Stoicism in real life. It's not about always being quiet. It's about knowing the cost of speaking and realizing that sometimes your silence isn't submission. It's control. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, you always have the option of having no opinion. It sounds passive, but it's anything but. It's choosing clarity over chaos, inner stillness over outside noise, emotional freedom over the need to be right. Because, let's be honest, most people don't argue to understand you. They argue to assert themselves, to flex, to dominate. And if you respond emotionally, You're not just wasting energy, you're handing them control of your inner state. So, intelligent people don't engage for approval. They engage with purpose. And if there's no clarity, growth, or genuine connection on the other side, they walk, not out of fear, but out of strategy, out of respect for their time and their peace. They know that control isn't about overpowering others, it's about mastering yourself. That's emotional intelligence. That's Stoic power. So next time someone comes at you with bait, ask yourself, is this battle worth my balance? Is this argument worth my energy? And if the answer is no, you already know what to do. Stay still, stay silent, and keep walking. Because sometimes the strongest response is none at all. You ever feel exhausted? Not from doing too much, but from having to constantly explain who you are, why you said no, why you walked away, why you chose peace over performance. At some point, explaining yourself becomes less about sharing and more about asking for permission, and that's where your power leaks. We've been conditioned to think that people will understand us if we just explain better, more clearly, more patiently, more emotionally. But the truth is, the right people don't need paragraphs, and the wrong ones will never get it, no matter how many chapters you offer. Explaining yourself to the wrong audience is like trying to teach poetry to someone reading with a calculator. They'll miss the point, and you'll exhaust your soul trying to make them feel something they're not even open to. Here's where emotional minimalism comes in. It's not about being cold. It's not about being mysterious for attention. It's about protecting your emotional bandwidth. When you explain less, you reserve energy for the moments that matter, for the people who've earned access. Every unnecessary explanation is an open door for others to insert doubt. And doubt, once planted, spreads like smoke. Slow, invisible, suffocating. But when you respond with calm restraint, when you say less and mean more, you stop inviting interference. The Stoics taught us this in ways that cut deep. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. Epictetus, that's not just philosophy, that's freedom. Because once you're okay with being misunderstood, once you no longer need everyone to get it, you get your time back, your focus, your power. Let me say it straight. You don't owe your story to people who only want sound bites. You don't need to justify your healing to people who never felt your wounds. You don't need to explain your boundaries to those who never respected them to begin with. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Let them misinterpret. Your job is not to translate your soul into a language they like. Your job is to live it. Because real intelligence isn't loud. It's selective. And emotional minimalism isn't a wall, it's a filter. It tells the world, I decide where my energy goes, and not everything qualifies. That silence you hold, that boundary you reinforce, that pause instead of explanation, it's not avoidance. It's sovereignty. And in that stillness, you'll find something no validation ever gave you: peace. Let's move forward. 3. Some people walk into a room and treat silence like a threat. They talk over others, interrupt to be heard, as if volume could disguise the insecurity behind their words. But here's the hard truth. The need to be the loudest is often a symptom of being the most unsure. When you're grounded, you don't chase attention. You attract it quietly. People often mistake noise for leadership. They assume the one doing all the talking is the one in control. But intelligence, real, practiced intelligence, doesn't need a spotlight. It lives in restraint. True presence doesn't fill every space. It creates space for thought, for awareness, for others to rise. When you speak less, you give your words more time to land, more weight to carry, more power to influence. Think of the most impactful voices in history. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't scream. He spoke with rhythm, pause, silence, and the world leaned in. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. He wrote more than he spoke. And yet, centuries later, his thoughts are studied daily because his silence was intentional. His words weren't frequent, they were earned. Now, let's bring that closer to home. Imagine you're in a meeting. One person dominates the conversation, talks fast, talks long, never pauses. Another person barely speaks, but when they do, everyone turns. The tone shifts, the air tightens. That's not charisma. That's strategic stillness. Psychologically speaking, those who must constantly speak are often battling internal noise. They're not proving something to you. They're trying to convince themselves. But intelligent people, they know when to enter a dialogue and when to observe it. They aren't afraid of silence because they don't equate silence with weakness. In fact, they know this. The person who can sit in silence without discomfort already holds the upper hand. This doesn't mean you should never speak. It means you should stop speaking by default. Start speaking by decision. When you become more selective with your words, you become more respected in your presence. People stop listening because you're loud. They start listening because you're intentional. And in today's world of constant noise, intentionality is the new power. So the next time you feel the urge to dominate the room, pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking to contribute or to be seen? Because when your silence carries clarity, your presence becomes undeniable. Let the world come to your voice, not because it's the loudest, but because it's the one that waited until the right moment to speak. And that's mastery. Some exhaustion doesn't show up in yawns. It doesn't come from long days or lack of sleep. It settles deeper in your spirit, in your sense of balance, in the space where your calm used to live. And the cause. It's not your schedule. It's not your workload. It's people. People who don't yell, but drain you silently. One story, one complaint, one passive-aggressive comment at a time. There's a heaviness that certain relationships bring, the kind that lingers even after the call ends. You hang up and feel like someone unplugged your soul, not because they're evil, but because they're unaware of how much they take, unaware of how little they give back, unaware that every interaction leaves you a little smaller. I want to tell you about someone, Anna. She was the go-to person in her circle, the emotional rock, the one who answered every text, picked up every call, and never said no to anyone's crisis, especially her sister, Melissa. A daily storm of complaints, shouts, and emotional debris. At first, Anna thought she was helping, That love meant being endlessly available. But slowly, it started to affect her health, her sleep, her patience, her sense of self, until one day she stumbled on a line by Marcus Aurelius. "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't need to upset you." And just like that, something clicked. Anna realized she didn't need to make a scene. She didn't need to accuse or explain. She just needed to do one thing: pull back quietly. It's what we now call a silent boundary. You don't have to slam a door to close it. You just stop holding it open for people who walk in with muddy feet. Here's the truth. If someone constantly drains your peace, they are not difficult. They are misaligned with your energy, with your values, with your life. And the most intelligent thing you can do is recognize that early and protect yourself before you're empty. Because giving endlessly isn't kindness, it's self-erasure. The Stoics understood this. They knew that peace was a kind of wealth, and not everyone should have access to it. Seneca once said, "Associate only with those who make you better. And if someone consistently makes you smaller, that's your cue." So no, you don't owe anyone your emotional energy. You don't owe everyone a reply. You don't need to feel guilty for stepping back. Love has limits. So does empathy. And protecting your peace isn't cruelty. It's wisdom, the quiet kind, the kind that walks away without explaining why. There's a quiet kind of power that doesn't need a stage. And then there's the opposite, the kind of energy that enters a room, needing to be seen, to be praised, to be validated. You've felt it before. Someone starts listing their titles, their awards, their income, their brilliance, and deep down, you don't feel inspired. You feel distanced. Because here's what most people miss. Boasting doesn't build connection. It builds walls. People often boast not from abundance, but from anxiety. The louder the flex, the quieter the self-belief behind it. They want to impress you because they haven't impressed themselves yet. So they look to your reaction to confirm who they are. But intelligent people, they don't play that game. They let their presence speak. Their decisions echo, and their results do the talking. There's a man I know, David, a financial advisor in his 60s. Quiet, measured, calm. In meetings, he rarely speaks first. He rarely talks about himself. But when he finally does, his words land like truth. Not because he brags, but because he's earned silence. The kind of silence built through discipline, hardship, and clarity. Others at the table toss accomplishments like confetti. David just listens, nods, asks questions, and still he's the one people trust most. Why? Because real power doesn't need permission to exist. It just is. Boasting is the mask. Stillness is the substance. When someone constantly advertises their value, they're hoping you'll believe it, because they're not sure they do. The Stoics knew this deeply. They believed that if you live in alignment, you don't need to announce it. Your life becomes the evidence. Here's the psychology behind it. Boasting says, "Please see me. Please believe in me. Please clap." But calm confidence says, "You'll notice when you're ready." There's no force, no push, just gravity. So next time you feel that subtle urge to prove yourself, pause, take a breath, and remember, people don't remember who talked the most. They remember who moved them. You don't need to list your worth. You need to live it. In your actions, in your tone, in your restraint. Because in a world of noise, quiet power is unforgettable. And the one who doesn't speak to be seen is often the one you can't ignore. There's a silent addiction that hides in everyday life, and it's not what you think. It's not your phone, not your coffee, not even your doubts. It's complaining, not the occasional sigh or vent after a long day, but the kind that becomes ritual, the kind where you talk about what's wrong, again and again and again, yet nothing ever changes. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Complaining gives the illusion of motion. It makes your pain feel active, like you're doing something about it. But motion isn't progress. Noise isn't clarity. And repetition isn't resolution. Intelligent people learn this early through exhaustion, through disappointment, through seeing the same problems follow them into different rooms. Why? Because what you don't transform, you transfer. Now let's be real. Some things deserve to be expressed. We all need to feel heard. But if you're not following that release with reflection or response, you're not healing. You're looping. And looped pain becomes identity. I'm the one who's always underappreciated. I'm the one stuck in this toxic job. I'm the one who never catches a break. You say it enough, and it becomes your truth. This is where Stoicism hits hard. The Stoics didn't avoid pain. They dissected it. They sat with the wound and asked, what part of this is mine to hold, and what part can I lay down? Because not all burdens are yours to carry. And complaining about the ones that aren't only weighs you down further. Let's introduce a model that helps break the cycle. It's called reflect, reframe, respond. Reflect. Before you say anything, pause. Ask, what am I actually feeling? Sometimes the anger is just grief in disguise. Sometimes the frustration is just fear with sharper teeth. Reframe. Now shift your lens. Instead of, why is this happening to me? Ask, what's the opportunity hidden in this? It doesn't mean the pain is good. It means you are strong enough to make use of it. Respond. Take one intentional step. It doesn't have to be big, but it has to move you. Even if the only action is deciding to let go. Here's what Stoic wisdom makes clear. You can't find peace in noise. You find it in restraint. You find it when you stop rehearsing the same wound and start rewriting the story around it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this, you have the power to revoke at any moment. Read that again. Complaining without action isn't honesty. It's a drip feed of your own energy. You keep feeding the thing that drains you. You validate the very prison you're trying to escape. But when you stop, when you observe, instead of react, when you act instead of echo, you become dangerous, unshakable, quietly in control. That's real power. That's emotional intelligence. That's Stoicism lived. You felt it before. That electric moment when a new idea lands clear, energizing, full of potential. Your mind starts racing. This is it. This is the one. I'm going to finally do it. And almost immediately, you feel the urge to tell someone, to share it, to post it, to declare it before the world. Not because it's ready, but because validation feels like momentum. But here's the harsh truth. Premature sharing isn't motivation. It's leakage. Every time you talk about your plans too early, you release a bit of that inner fire. You exchange intention for attention. And what once burned with clarity becomes clouded by other people's energy. People will start projecting their own fears onto your vision. Are you sure that'll work? Isn't that too risky? What if it doesn't turn out like you expect? They'll mean well, but their doubts plant seeds. And if you're not grounded enough, those seeds grow into hesitation. Real doers know this. They don't build for applause. They build for impact. They keep their early moves sacred. They nurture the foundation before they ever lay the bricks in public view. Because once the world sees it, your focus will shift from creation to performance. Instead of asking, "Is this the right next step?" you'll start asking, "What will people think of this?" That's how vision gets diluted. Here's the Stoic perspective. Epictetus once warned us not to place our happiness in what's out of our control. And reactions, opinions, expectations, they all fall in that category. What you can control, your discipline, your effort, your silence, especially in the early days. Before your goal has roots, think of a seed. It doesn't need to be clapped for. It needs darkness, warmth, time. A spotlight at the wrong time doesn't help it grow, it stunts it. Let me give you something practical. Before you share a plan, ask yourself 3 questions. Am I sharing this to build accountability or to feel significance? If no one applauded, would I still pursue it? Does speaking this aloud serve the goal, or my ego? And if the answers reveal your need to feel seen before you've done the work, take a step back, because once your goals are spoken, they become vulnerable to other people's noise. And that noise, it doesn't just distract, it derails. So here's your Stoic strategy. Protect the planting season. Don't show the roots before they're ready to hold weight. Let progress become your announcement. The finished product makes a louder impact than any early promise. Build in silence. Move in quiet power. By the time they notice, it's already done. Remember this. Real motivation is born in movement, not in noise. The ones who succeed don't start by performing. They start by building out of sight, under pressure, with discipline. That's where the real momentum lives. In the work, no one sees. And by the time they do, you don't need their applause anymore. You've already proven it to yourself. They laughed it off. They said, "Don't take it so seriously." They brushed past your no like it was negotiable. Again and again. And at first, you let it slide. You told yourself, maybe they didn't mean it. They're just being themselves. They didn't know better. But here's the truth. Intelligent people come to understand. Repeated boundary violations are never accidents. They're tests. Tests to see how much of yourself you'll give away before you finally draw the line. Every time you stay silent, every time you play nice, every time you downplay the discomfort, you're training them, teaching them how to treat you. And if you allow it, you've given permission. Not verbally, but through inaction. Here's the core rule of Stoic boundaries. Whatever you tolerate, you teach. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop trying to explain your boundaries and start enforcing them. You don't need to over-justify. You don't owe lengthy speeches. You don't need to fix how they feel about it. You set the line. You honor it. And when it's crossed, you move. Not in anger, but in clarity. Let me give you a concept, the clear exit. It's the art of removing access from those who repeatedly test your limits without fireworks, without fanfare. You don't announce it. You implement it. You respond slower. You decline more often. You stop over-explaining. You exit conversations early. You end emotional labor where it's not reciprocated. Not to punish them, but to protect you. Because here's the thing, boundaries that aren't protected are invitations. Invitations for disrespect. Invitations for control. Invitations for energy theft disguised as connection. People who cross your boundaries repeatedly are playing a game of control. Maybe not consciously, but it's about power. They're watching to see how far they can push. And the moment you finally say, enough, they may push back harder, guilt trip you, call you cold, accuse you of changing. But intelligent people know guilt is often the last tool of the boundary breaker. You don't flinch. You don't get pulled back in, because your self-respect isn't up for negotiation. A Stoic doesn't need to argue to reclaim peace. They just reclaim it, silently, decisively. As Seneca once wrote, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. That's the litmus test. If someone is exhausting you, shrinking you, or constantly testing your kindness, they are not your assignment. They are your signal. Here's your strategy for handling boundary breakers. Recognize the pattern. If it repeats, it's not random. Stop educating. You're not their teacher. You're their mirror. Enforce without emotion. Boundaries are acts of clarity, not punishment. Withdraw access, not kindness. Be firm, not cruel. Because in the end, the people who respect your boundaries will never need to be convinced. And the ones who fight them, they were never really with you, only with what they could extract from you. When you stop tolerating disrespect, you don't lose relationships. You lose the illusion that those relationships were ever real. And in that space of quiet removal, you gain something stronger than validation. You gain peace. 9. There's a certain pressure to correct, to prove, to show you know more. And sometimes, it doesn't even feel like ego. It feels like justice, like truth, deserves a voice. Like silence would mean you agree with something wrong. But here's what intelligent people know, and what the Stoics lived. Being right isn't always the highest virtue. Sometimes, being still is. Think about it. How many times has the phrase, "I'm right," ended a conversation instead of deepening it? It doesn't invite understanding. It closes the door. Now flip it. Say instead, "I'm listening." Suddenly, you create space. Space for dialogue, for clarity, for mutual respect. That's the shift. From winning to understanding. From dominating to connecting. A powerful example of this Mr. Fred Rogers, not a Stoic by name, but a Stoic in practice. In 1969, he sat before the U.S. Senate, tasked with defending public television funding. The room was cold. The senator, uninterested, dismissive, skeptical. And yet Rogers didn't bring graphs, didn't raise his voice, didn't list credentials. He recited a song. He spoke softly about the emotional needs of children. He held space. And by the end, the senator, visibly moved, responded, "I think it's wonderful. Looks like you just earned the $20 million. Fred Rogers didn't win by overpowering. He won by not needing to. That's what real strength looks like. It doesn't bark. It doesn't boast. It doesn't need to prove anything, because it knows what it is." The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion, not because you're indifferent, but because you're wise enough to know not every battle deserves your sword." Psychologically, the need to be right stems from a fragile identity, a fear that being wrong means being less, that if someone sees your mistake, they'll see your weakness, your unworthiness. But intelligence, real intelligence, has nothing to prove. It's not defensive. It's curious. It listens. It reflects. It pauses before responding, because it knows. The calmest person in the room is rarely the one fighting to be heard. It's the one who's already secure in their truth. Here's the real power move. Let them think they've won. Smile. Let it go. Walk away. Why? Because when you no longer need to win, you've already won something greater. Peace. And peace, unlike being right, doesn't fade after the argument ends. It stays with you. It shapes how you sleep, how you lead, how you live. So next time you feel that urge, rise up the itch to correct, to counter, to prove. Ask yourself, am I doing this to be understood or just to be right? Because in choosing the former, you don't just rise above the noise. You become untouchable within it. That's Stoicism. That's true emotional intelligence. And that is leadership. You feel it in your chest first. Tight, hot, sudden. Someone says something disrespectful. You're triggered. Your mind races to respond, defend yourself, correct them, put them in their place. But wait, what if you didn't? What if the most powerful thing you could do in that moment was pause? That moment, right between stimulus and response, is where Stoicism lives. The Stoics taught that we are not disturbed by events, but by our interpretation of them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, your anger doesn't come from what they said. It comes from what it meant to you. And here's where intelligence steps in. You learn to question the meaning before you react to it. That's why emotionally reactive people often feel exhausted. They're constantly giving their power away to triggers, to tone, to temporary moods. But wise people, they wait. They insert what we'll call the 3-second rule. Whenever something provokes you, pause for 3 seconds. Not 30, just 3. Long enough to breathe, to shift out of impulse mode, to ask, is this worth my energy? Does this require a reaction or reflection. That tiny pause, it feels like nothing, but it saves everything. Let me tell you something radical. You don't owe anyone an immediate reaction. Not in conversation, not in conflict, not even in love. Emotional reactivity is often mistaken for passion, but in reality it's unprocessed pain wearing speed. Responding too fast means you're not choosing your response. You're letting the other person choose it for you. And when you do that, you surrender control. Real power is stillness in chaos, a kind of quiet that commands attention not by volume but by stability. Have you ever been in a room where someone stays completely calm while others lose their cool? They don't flinch. They don't raise their voice. They don't retaliate. And yet everyone feels their presence. That's emotional gravity, and it's built through restraint. Think of your emotions like waves. The impulse is to surf the first one that hits, but the wiser choice, wait. Watch the tide. Choose the wave you ride, based on direction, not just intensity. From a psychological standpoint, reactivity often comes from unresolved wounds. The need to be heard, to defend, to not feel weak. But what if silence wasn't weakness? What if it was mastery? Here's a simple framework to help pause. Breathe. Respond, don't react. Let others be loud. Let them flail. Let them fall into emotional spirals. You keep your rhythm. Because when your peace is non-negotiable, you become dangerous in the best possible way. So the next time you're tempted to lash out, to clap back, to teach someone a lesson, remember this. A single pause has more power than 1,000 loud words, and the person who controls their response controls the outcome. That's Stoicism. That's presence. That's leadership under pressure. And most of all, that's freedom. Wisdom isn't loud. It isn't about how much you know or how eloquently you can speak. It's about what you choose to ignore, what you let pass without letting it pierce your peace. Intelligent people don't react to everything. They filter. They ask, is this worth my time? Does this deserve space in my mind? Will this matter in 5 years or even 5 days? They understand that not everything requires a response. Not every battle is worth entering. Not every opinion needs correcting. And that is what makes them powerful. They don't seek to impress. They seek to stay aligned, rooted, unmoved, clear, because the person who doesn't flinch, who doesn't rush to defend their ego, who can remain still in chaos, holds the highest ground of all. So if this message struck a chord, if you felt something shift inside you, drop a comment below with, I choose clarity. Let the world know you're not here to play noise games. You're here to build quiet strength. And when you're ready to go deeper, watch the Stoic Guide to Inner Peace or discover why emotionally intelligent people say less. Because the next level of power is found in what you don't say. Stay grounded, stay focused, and as always, stay stoic.